Hello traders, and welcome to this video series about our new portfolio compilation workflow process. For those of you who are new to this series, I recommend that you listen to the prior episodes to catch up. In our last episode, we discussed our design-first approach to workflow development. This is an essential phase of the workflow process, where we establish a design framework within which we allow our data mining stages of the workflow process to work within. This design-first approach achieves two outcomes. It helps to reduce overfitting of our models, and it also ensures that our system design logic targets the desired edge that we wish to exploit using our classic trend-following portfolios. The outcomes of this design phase of the workflow process was the generation of 6 unique trend-following models, each of which had the golden rules of trend following embedded within their designs. These 6 different trend-following models allowed for diversification of entry and incorporated ATR-based initial stops and trailing stops. And they included the DON, which is a Donchian breakout method of entry, the MAT, which is a moving average crossover method of entry, the BBB, which is a Bollinger Band breakout method of entry, the BBR, which is a Bollinger Band retracement entry into a trend method, the box, which is a congestion box breakout trader, and the reg, which is a regression channel breakout trader. Now, each of these different trend-following systems have different strengths and weaknesses when exploiting material trends found in the tails of the market distribution of returns. Now, under system diversification, we use this ensemble of trend-following systems to generate correlation benefits and also to improve the chances of the ensemble capturing the beneficial fruits of the outliers which we are targeting using this method. So here we are now with 6 different trend-following models, which have been specifically designed for purpose. And now we want to take these designs into the data furnace to evaluate the robustness of the possible values assigned to the design parameters of our models. So in this episode, we'll be discussing the first stage of our data mining processes used in our workflow. Stage 1 of our data mining process uses 7 separate algorithms, and 6 of these algorithms relate to the data mining options available for each of our specific trend-following model designs that we've already discussed. And the final 7th algorithm in the series runs the data mining process over the desired selection of models and date ranges that we select. So you can see these 7 algorithms in the listing. Here we are. We have algorithm for BBB, algorithm for BBR, algorithm for box, algorithm for DON, algorithm for MAT, algorithm for the regression line trader, and then our 7th algorithm relates to the actual data mining process itself. You'll notice that each of these 7 algorithms is using the prefix ST1 for stage 1. So it's just easy as we step through these algorithms to know which stage of the workflow process these algorithms relate to by using this prefix of the stage and the number. Before we get into the detail of each of these algorithms, we need to understand what the stage 1 phase of the data mining process is seeking to achieve. Now, this first step of the workflow generates a comprehensive database of performance results for each system permutation chosen through our data mining process and for each market defined in our symbol listing. This is the longest process in our workflow as the market's being tested across and the number of possible permutations can be large dependent on the settings we choose in this stage 1 process. The output files generated by this stage 1 process are then used by the next stage of the workflow. Now, during this phase of the process, We are only focused on the capability of our models to extract an edge from trending market conditions. We are not concerned at this stage of the workflow with some of the unique limitations that we may face with respect to our levels of capital available or the broker-specific limitations that may impede our ability to trade some of these markets. So, for the stage 1 processes, we undertake this process assuming infinite capital, and we evaluate each system across our entire symbol listing and also exclude the impact of transaction-specific broker costs, such as swap, which is a holding cost found with our CFD products. The intent of this first step of the data mining process is simply to evaluate the trend following capabilities of possible permutations of different parameter values for every market in our testing universe, assuming no capital limitations. Later, in stage 3 of the process, we evaluate our trend following models with respect to limitations we face as a retail trader, namely the practical limits we face as retail traders with finite capital, the impact of cost burdens associated with our choice of CFDs we trade with, and the broker restrictions such as minimum lot sizes which may impede our ability to diversify widely. So, now that we understand what stage 1 is about, let's now start to understand the testing properties that we need to assign to each of our stage 1 algorithms. Before we commence the stage 1 data mining process, we first need to configure the ranges of the parameter values we want to evaluate for each of our 6 trend following models. So, let's start with configuring the expert properties of our first trend following model, the Bollinger Band Breakout Model, or the BBB. So to do this, the first thing we need to do is refer to the Strategy Tester module of MT4, which is this section here. If we don't see this on our platform screen, we can activate it by going to the View option on the menu and selecting Strategy Tester. This toggles on and toggles off the strategy tester. So now that we have the strategy tester up on our screen, the first thing we've got to do is select this first stage algorithm BBB. To do that, we drop down the Expert Advisor listing, and from our selection of ATS24 Expert Advisors, we select the stage 1 BBB algorithm here. So once we've selected that algorithm, we don't need to worry about the symbols. I just select open prices only in my model testing. We don't need to worry about the date ranges, as this is specified in the final algorithm of stage 1, which is the data mining algorithm. Set the period to daily. We'll be undertaking this workflow process on the daily time frame. I just set my spread to current, even though it's going to be referring to the symbol listing and the spread applied in our symbol listing. And as you remember in our earlier episodes, it's double the current spread. I select optimization, and I check this box, tick it, because we will be undertaking optimization of using this algorithm. And then I select the expert properties here, and I go to the testing input tab, where it asks for an initial deposit. Because in stage 1 we're assuming infinite levels of capital at this stage, I set an initial deposit of $1 million in USD denomination. Then we come to the inputs tab here. And now we need to go through this, the details of this inputs tab, as this is the major settings that we need to configure to run the optimization for the stage 1 data mining process for this particular strategy, which is the BBB. So let's run through these settings. So the first setting is the password, which has been supplied to members in our forum. The next step is we have 3 options here in relation to the risk settings we apply to the stage 1 process. Now, just as a word of guidance, this entire workflow process, we recommend that you use an uncompounded process, and therefore we recommend you use the fixed dollar lot per trade, at least for the workflow process, to generate the final output results for our portfolio. At that point in time, when we go live or into the demo trade environment, that's where we can start applying a degree of compounding. But for the entire workflow process, we strongly recommend that you use a fixed dollar risk per trade. Now, in this instance, we're recommending, given we're assuming an infinite level of capital, just for the purposes of this stage 1 process, we recommend $500 per trade. And so we set the first percentage risk per trade at 0, and the number of lots per trade at 0. We don't want to be testing these. And we set dollar risk per trade at $500. Now, in relation to ATR, as all our trading decisions are based on ATR or multiples of ATR, you have the choice of using any period. We recommend using a longer term ATR, and so we've defaulted this value to 100. However, personally, I use an ATR of 25, so I'm just going to set it to 25 now. However, you're free to choose any value you like, and you can even vary this at different steps of the workflow process. So now onto the stop loss setting in ATR multiples. Now, this is, we want to undertake data mining in relation to only a few of these variables. If we don't tick on these boxes here, it accepts these as the default settings for the workflow process, that the values described in this column here. However, because I want to undertake data mining across a range of variables for the stop loss setting, I need to click on this box here. Now I want to select the minimum and maximum range of my data mining process and the step intervals of which the evaluation is conducted. So in this case, I want to start with a stop loss setting of 1. I want to assess variables up to a stop loss setting of 8. And I want to look at step intervals of 0.5 in ATR. So there we go. So I've now set a range of different variables to assess for this particular parameter, which is a stop loss setting between 1 and 8 at increments of 0.5. Now, I don't use fine increments here, as that does tend to encourage the process to overfit your results. So use fairly broad settings here and keep these what we call loose pants to these particular models. So in this instance, I'm only looking at a stop loss of 1, then a stop loss of 1.5, then a stop loss of 2, then a stop loss of 2.5, etc., all the way up to values of 8 as far as my stop loss in ATR multiples. So that's it for the stop loss range I want to evaluate over. Now I come down to the trailing stop loss mechanism, and exactly the same way I wanted to run through different variables for this parameter setting, and in this case I wanted to look at an initial start of a 1 ATR multiple up to a 10 ATR multiple with step increments of 0.5. So let's put those values in. 1 up to a maximum of 10 at step intervals of 0.5. Just make sure that this box is toggled. That's correct. So we're now evaluating two different parameters here with a data mining process undertaking this range of variables here. So now we come down to the method of trailing stop application, and we give two options here. One is a continuous trailing stop application, which occurs at each bar, or we have a step trailing stop loss mechanism here. Now, personally, I prefer the step method, so I don't wish to evaluate these different options. I just want to choose the step method as my process in stage 1. So rather than clicking on this tick box here, I set my value in this value range column here to 1, which means it defaults to the step value here. Now, if you did want to evaluate a data mining process using both these options here, simply click on this tick box here and set your start range at 0, which will therefore evaluate the continuous method, and set your final range at 1, which means that it will assess the step method. Set that to 0, level of 1 increment, and up to 1, which means it will test both options, step and continuous, if you have this tick box selected. However, I only want to select my my step method, so I turn this off, which means that by turning this off, it's only going to evaluate this 1 here in this column, which means the step method. With this break-even setting in ATR multiples, you also have the option of setting the stop loss to break even after a price move of so many ATRs. So in this example, we have opted for no break-even setting, and we have set, therefore, we haven't turned on the data mining process for this particular option, and we've got this set to 0. In relation to trade direction, we have the ability to evaluate both short, which is 1, 0, which is both long and short, or 1, which is long. And you can select to trade long only, short only, or either, both. As we are data mining for Forex in the above example, we leave this as 0. Now, in relation to the maximum number of trades, long or short, we normally limit the number to be 1 long and or 1 short position for most of our EAs, but the option is here for you to try multiple trades if you like. Where this becomes more relevant is in the box trader, where we use, for instance, a value of 5 trades. So you apply settings in a similar way as we've shown you in this entire process before. In relation to the fade position option, we would not normally look to fade a breakout, but you have the option to see how this might affect your trades. The default value is false. In relation to the adjust profit for the last bar, now during backtesting, you'll have noticed that there are times when trades are closed at the end of the test run. Now, in live trading, these trades would likely run on and close out when the trailing stop loss is hit. Now, because the strategy tester closes these at the end of a backtest run, the profit shown is dictated by the date chosen to close the test. This can at times skew the resulting data. This option allows you to be more conservative and record the profit and loss should that trade close out right now at the current stop loss position. This is the only price that is guaranteed at the end of a run, as the performance of those trades is unknown into the future. So you have the option of not adjusting for this profit loss. But if you do, your trader will be more conservative than the results shown in the MT4 reports. Now, only use closed trades and realized balance. Well, this option allows the user to look at the equity curve of only realized trades, for instance, closed trades, and this option ignores any unrealized or floating profit loss. This approach is discussed in detail on the members forum and is our recommendation, noting that this will ignore any trades that are open when a strategy tester finishes. In this case, the results will differ from the MT4 reports. Should you mark this as false, then all calcs are on floating equity. Now we come down to the Bollinger period settings. So in this particular option here, we do want to the data mine for this range of settings. So click on this as an option for the BBB, which is the one we're selecting here. And in this case, I want to look at a Bollinger period that ranges from 1 up to, a Bollinger period that ranges from 50 up to 250 with step increments of 50. So this therefore looks at the Bollinger period. When I come to the Bollinger deviation, I also wanted to data mine for the Bollinger deviation, and in this case I set the deviation from 1 standard deviation up to 3 standard deviations with increments of 0.5. Now, in relation to the trending moving average period, this is a default that we would recommend keeping this as an option of 200 for the moving average, which is used for the determining the overall trend of the BBB. We don't recommend you data mine this particular option here, but of course you have the option to if you wish to. But the intent of this is with the BBB, the first thing is we use a moving average trend filter to determine the direction of the trend, and then we use the Bollinger period and the Bollinger deviation as a means to determine when to break out in the direction of that trend. So therefore, for this particular evaluation for the data mining phase of stage 1, we're only selecting 4 different parameters here to evaluate in terms of data mining across a range of variables. But the combination of these variables create a vast number of possible permutations that need to be run for this test. So this is just an example for the BBB. Now, in all of the other particular algorithms we use for ATS 24, you will need to configure them in a similar way for the different algorithms. Now, we discussed this in our forum with our members, but for the purposes of this video, we've shown you one example for the BBB, but we need to undertake this for all of the other 6 systems as well, and it's a very similar process here. So given that we've shown you one process, we won't be going through all of the other processes. So if we're happy for the settings that we've established for the BBB algorithm, which is this algorithm over on the left here in our navigator menu, we now want to save this set file as a set file so we can refer to it in future workflow processes. So I'm happy now with the selection here running across 4 different permutations. I now save this and I give it the name ATS 24 stage 1 BBB.set file. So I save it here and so I can refer to it in future workflow processes. So that's it for the BBB. I can now close that off. Now, you obviously also need to do this for all of the other 6 different design EAs here. Let's go into BBR. You'll notice that a similar range of options is put here, but this is specific for the BBR. So it's looking at the Bollinger Band period, the Bollinger deviation, similar stop loss and trailing stop settings in ATR period. So a very similar process here for your desired data mining process. If we go into the box trader, you'll notice that a very similar process once again. However, when we come down to the maximum number of trades, long or short, we fiddle with this number here and turn it to 5, but we'll discuss that with our members on the forum, but it's a similar process here. We set this up for all of the particular algorithms in stage 1 that we wish to run the data mining process over. So once we're happy with all of those settings and we've saved the different set files, so you can see here that I've saved set files for the BBB, the BBR, the box, the DON, the MAT and the reg. They're all saved and set so I can refer to them or bring them up. Now we move on to the next algorithm, which runs the actual data mining process for stage 1 across all of those 6 different algorithms. So let's select that from the list. So we come down to ATS 24 stage 1 data mining.ex4. We select that option here and we now go into expert properties. So Now what we need to do here is we need to assign the account login, the account password and the account server to our broker platform that we'll be undertaking this test on. These are specific to your own logins and passwords and servers that you are using for your different brokers that our members use. You need to set these up correctly in accordance with those settings that you have with your broker. And you'll notice now we've got the ability to undertake data mining for all of the 6 different strategies. But in this instance, if you wanted to only undertake 2 of the strategies, turn these from true to false for the ones you don't wish to test. But in this case, we want the data mining process to run through all of the 6 different strategies that we've just been through previously. And here we come to the test range date for our stage 1 process. Now, in this case, we define here a test range, in this instance, or in this example, from the period 1st of the 1st, 2005 up to 1st of the 1st, 2020. Now, we want to preserve some of data for outer sample testing, just to give us confidence that this process works. So you'll notice that we don't test up to the current date. So here we're giving approximately a bit over 1.5 years going forward to current day now, which is 4th of the 7th, 2022. We're giving about 1.5 years or so of outer sample capability at the end of this process to assess our strategies. But in this instance, this therefore undertakes a data mining process over this data range for our stage 1 process. We don't want to use all of the data, we just want to use sufficient data so that our models can hone in on some fairly robust settings according to the settings we've defined to evaluate for our workflow process. In relation to the portable mode here, we set this to true if we're running MT4 in portable mode. Most of us don't run it in portable mode. I don't run it in portable mode, so I set this to false. If you want more information about what it means in portable mode, ask that question on our forum and Fred would be more than happy to answer that to you. So in this case, once I've set the login, the password, the server, selected which of the strategies I want the stage 1 process to evaluate, and set the date range and set the portable mode to false, I now save this as another set file which I can refer to. So now this has been set up. In the testing tab, I also set this to $1 million for this stage 1 process. Once that's all set up, we are now ready to run our workflow process. So now we'll step to undertaking the data mining process, and I'll show you what happens during this process. So we've set up all of our settings for our individual systems to evaluate the workflow process, and we've configured the data mining algorithm, which is the one we've now selected here with our expert properties. Now, in relation to all of these other items on the strategy tester, we don't worry about them. The only thing we do is we turn off visual mode, just make sure that's off, make sure that everything else we don't worry about. Now we're ready to generate a batch file process that will generate a number of different batch files which will then be used for the ATS24 workflow process. Now, just to remind you all, we're just going to go back now to the files that have already been created through our workflow process. The symbol listing, as we've already discussed in a prior episode, and the ATS24 folder, which is currently blank here. These are the only folders that have been created through our workflow process so far. So now we're on to the point of running the data mining for stage 1 to generate the batch file processes. So we select start. This is a very quick process, and when we go back to those files, we'll notice that if we go into the ATS24 folder, we'll find that there's a large number of text files. These have all been now created, which include all of the specifications we've just assigned to our data mining process. And you'll also notice that there is a file here called batch.txt. So you'll be familiar with this, as this process was used for our symbol list generation. However, now we actually want to undertake the batch file process. So to do that, the first thing we do is we turn off Metatrader, turn it off. And we now refer to files here, and we go to the batch.txt file. We rename the txt extension bat, as I'm doing here, and it's now going to say, do we wish to change the name of that extension? We select yes. Now we're ready to go by right-clicking on that batch file, but making sure that our Metatrader is closed, which we've already closed. But now by right-clicking on that batch file, we want to run it as administrator. So we select this option here. It then says, do you want to allow this app to make changes to your device? We select yes. So here we go. We can see a DOS command coming up now and the batch file process running. Now, what it's doing now is it's now stepping through each of those individual text files in that listing, and you'll see it starting on the DON trader on AUD-CAD. AUD-CAD was the first file in our symbol listing. The DON is now running for this optimization process, and you'll see that it's currently at 123 permutations of an 8,835 permutation process. In other words, for that DON system, we actually elected about 3 different parameters to evaluate with different step size increments. The possible number of total combinations is 8,835, and you can see this process is stepping through for AUD-CAD for the DON. So if we go to our listing here, you'll notice that now if we go to files here, you'll see that it's now created a subfolder called DON, and you'll see that the first one that is now being evaluated, AUD-CAD for stage 1, is now being generated, and you'll see the size of the file is growing as the optimization process is being undertaken. Now, this entire process, if you imagine, we've got 6 systems to test. Some of the different parameter permutations is more than 8,835 for the individual 6 different systems we've just set up, and it's evaluating this across our symbol history listing, which is large. So this is the biggest process of our entire workflow process, and this is generating a database of results which is used for all of our future workflow processes. So once this system is running, you need to let it run, and in this case, this particular sequence of events we've let run now, you will find will take about 24 to 48 hours to complete. So you've just got to let your computer do its thing, running through all of these particular processes and generating a database. So we'll now come to the end of this exercise, which is in this instance about 24 hours later. I've got a fairly fast PC that does a lot of grunting, but we'll now I'll now stop this process and come to the end of the process to show you what the final results for the stage 1 process look like. So here we are 24 hours later, after we've gone fishing for 24 hours while our computers have been doing all of the hard work. And when we come back to our screens, we notice that Metatrader installation is closed, which is expected. At the end of the batch file process, it remains closed. And then we go to the tester files and we look at we notice now that we've got a large number of subdirectories recreated in the tester directory. These particular 6 subdirectories relate to the database of files for each of the different systems, the 6 systems we've tested. But let's step through each of these folders that are created. The first thing we'll notice is ATS24. Now, when we go into ATS24, you'll actually find that that there is the BAT file still remaining in this directory. I've just cleared this out. Once the workflow process has been undertaken, that BAT file that was generated can be deleted, which I've already done. So when you go to ATS24, normally you see only one file remaining here. All of the rest of the text files that we previously saw have now been processed and they've been relocated into different directories. So when we go to ATS24, it should be blank, or at least with that BAT file, which we delete. We then come to the BBB selection. You'll notice that there are now 48 different CSV files in here relating to the markets specified in our symbol list. So if we go to our symbol list, you'll notice here, you'll notice that in total we've got 48 markets which are being evaluated through this symbol listing, and therefore when we go back to each one of these subdirectories for our systems, there'll be 48 separate files created through the stage 1 process. So let's for instance go into the CSV file created for gold, XAU, USD, and see what information is presented here. So you'll see that in this particular run for gold, there should be 7,126 different files, different rows created. This relates to the fact that for this particular process for BBB, it evaluated 7,126 possible permutations, and every one of the permutations is held in this database. So as we step through the database, you'll notice that the strategy is all for BBB. You'll notice that we have the gross profit and the net profit. Now remember that Fred has designed this so we exclude the impacts of swap from this analysis. So the net profit here is not the net profit you'll find in Metatrader, which is after all costs. For this particular stage 1 process, we exclude the impact of swap, so the variance between the gross profit and the net profit relates to the only the spread that's incurred, or the commissions incurred in the process, as opposed to the swap, which is excluded. That's the important part that comes back into stage 3 of our process. You'll also notice the number of trades generated through each of these particular strategy variations. We've got the MAR ratio, the Serenity ratio, the ATR period, so as you remember, we set this to 25. The stop loss variables assigned, which steps through the particular range of variables we assigned in our workflow process. The trailing stop variable for each of the runs, the trail type, break-even multiplier if applicable. All of these values reflect all of the settings that we've evaluated through this process. And we have the gross profit result here and the net profit result here, which is an adjusted net profit result. Now, this is the result for gold, and we'll find the same for every one of these different markets is the same. Go to Nat Gas, open that up. You'll find that the number of permutations was 7126 again, and for Nat Gas, this entire process is repeated and all of the variables are recorded. So for BBB, you can see that we've got every possible parameter variation run for BBB, and we get the same for all of the different strategies here. Let's go into DON. Let's look at gold. We'll notice that for the DON system, it's run through 8,836 parameters for our testing process, and the database is here. So as you can imagine, all of the files contained in these 6 systems effectively represents a database of all possible permutations run through our selection process. This is a very important step. This database is used for all other aspects of the workflow process as a reference device, looking at the evaluation of all of our trading strategies on a pre-cost basis or a pre-swap basis to look at their trending potential. So as we go through the particular different parameter sets, you'll see that some are profitable, some are unprofitable. So these are important values which are considered at all future steps of our workflow process. Now, once this has all been created, we recommend that you create a backup of all of these different the subdirectories here, as this is an important process. It took about 24 hours to complete, and you don't want to lose this information. So simply take a copy or a backup of these and keep it separate, just in case you find that these files become corrupted. So that's really it for the stage 1 process. In our next video, which will be in another week or so, we'll be looking at the multi-market process, which now looks at evaluating all of those different parameter values across our entire symbol listing. So this is where in the multi-market step we're looking for universal features that are applicable across many different markets, as opposed to being specific to an individual market. And this is important for our trend following models, as we're using universal models that are applicable across a broad range of markets, as opposed to being specific to the characteristics of an individual market. There was a lot in this episode. It's fairly highly technical. It does explicitly refer to our workflow process, so it might sound like gobbledygook for many people listening to this for the first time, but it is important for our members who are using this process to understand each of the steps in this way. So thanks for bearing with us, and I look forward to speaking to you in a week or so on the next stage, or stage 2 of the workflow process, which is looking at the multi-market step. Thanks very much. Bye.